The pride of Wales. Joe Calzaghe is widely regarded as one of the greatest boxers to hail from the United Kingdom. His incredible professional career, coupled with his numerous amateur accolades, make his boxing career something to truly marvel at. Born on the 23rd of March in 1972 in London, England, to a Sardinian father and a Welsh mother, Enzo and Jackie, Calzaghe would describe his upbringing as quite poor, though his family worked as hard as they could to provide. Calzaghe's first boxing lessons would come from his own father Enzo, who was a musician with no formal boxing training, who would continue to train Calzaghe throughout his entire career. As a young man in the amateurs, Calzaghe would reportedly have 120 bouts, with a staggering 110 wins and only 10 losses. He would win 4 schoolboy ABA titles and 3 consecutive senior British ABA titles between 1990 and 1993. Calzaghe would make his professional debut on October 1, 1993, against Britain's Paul Hanlon, who had an unflattering record of 7 wins and 16 losses. Calzaghe would stop his opponent in the very first round, dropping him with a massive shot, proving that even in the early days, he had dynamite in his hands. He wouldn't face an opponent with a positive record until his 9th professional bout, which came against American Frank Minton, who held a record of 26 wins, 21 losses, and 1 draw. Calzaghe would win the fight in devastating fashion by first-round knockout. His first real test as a professional was in his 14th pro fight, in the form of Scotland's Stephen Wilson, who entered the fight with a record of 11 wins and just 1 loss. The fight was for the then-vacant BBB of C British super middleweight title. Calzaghe would outwork his man all night. He put his foot on the gas in the 8th round to force the referee to intervene and call the fight off, saving any further damage to his opponent. Calzaghe would have a pair of bouts against lackluster opponents with barely positive records before making the first defense of his newly claimed regional title against Britain's Mark Delaney in Calzaghe's 17th pro fight. Delaney entered the bout undefeated at 21 and 0. Delaney was knocked down twice, once in the first round and once in the 5th, before the referee stepped in and stopped the fight as Delaney was taking another knee. After making his first defense of the BBB of C title, Calzaghe would have 3 more bouts against lower-level competition before running into another undefeated up-and-comer in his 21st pro fight, in the likes of American Tyler Hughes, who came into the fight with a perfect record of 12 wins and no losses or draws. Unfortunately for Hughes, his first professional loss would be quick and concise, with Calzaghe connecting with a brutal left hook at the end of a deadly barrage of punches that knocked Hughes out in the very first round. In his very next fight, Calzaghe would face Luciano Torres, a former Brazilian and South American champion who entered the fight with 45 wins and just 2 losses. Calzaghe would floor Torres in the 2nd round, with Torres barely able to rise to his feet to finish the round. Unfortunately for him, it would be for naught, as Calzaghe would stop him in the 3rd round, though by bizarre circumstances. After repeatedly checking on Torres, the referee would try to explain to Torres that he did not have his gloves up in a defensive manner, so he was stopping the fight. But likely due to a language barrier, Torres would try to wave the referee off and attempt to continue fighting, with the fight ultimately being waved off after a very weird 30 seconds of confusion. In Calzaghe's 23rd pro fight, he would finally get his first chance at a world championship for the then-vacant WBO super middleweight world title against British boxing legend Chris Eubank Sr., who held a professional record of 45 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws. In the opening round, Calzaghe would come out strong and would knock Eubank down with a huge left hook. With a smile on his face, Eubank rose to his feet to continue to fight. Then in the 10th round, Calzaghe would once again catch Chris Eubank clean, scoring another knockdown. Eubank rose to his feet again until the final bell. Calzaghe would win the fight by a wide unanimous decision with scores of 118 to 110 by 2 judges and 116 to 111 by the 3rd judge. Calzaghe had finally achieved every boxer's dream and claimed himself a world title. but he was nowhere near done cementing his legacy in the boxing world. Calzaghe would make 2 defenses of his world title before running into another British boxing hype train in his 26th pro fight against former WBC super middleweight world champion Robin Reed, who came into the fight with a record of 26 wins, only 1 loss, and 1 draw. Calzaghe would come out on top, winning the bout by a controversial split decision, with 2 of the judges scoring the fight 116 to 111 in favor of Calzaghe, while the 3rd judge also scored the fight 116 to 111, but in favor of Reed. Nevertheless, Calzaghe pushed on. After defending his world title another 4 times, it was time for Calzaghe to put his undefeated streak on the line against another undefeated rising contender. In his 31st professional fight, Calzaghe would match up against Germany's Mario Veit, who held a clean record of 30 wins and no losses or draws. This much anticipated bout between 2 undefeated Europeans would end much quicker than anyone could have expected, and unfortunately for Veit would not go his way. Calzaghe floored Veit. Veit struggled to his feet to meet the count and continue fighting, but wouldn't last much longer, only to force the referee to intervene and stop the contest after another relentless attack by Calzaghe. After 4 more defenses of his world title, Calzaghe would run into an unexpected roadblock in his 36th pro fight against American Byron Mitchell, who held a record of 25 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. In the 2nd round, Mitchell would catch Calzaghe with a devastating short right hook as Calzaghe was throwing a punch, sending him to the canvas. Calzaghe put his brave face on and got to his feet to continue fighting. Moments later, craving revenge, Calzaghe would get his get back with a massive blow that sent Mitchell to the canvas with a knockdown of his own. A warrior himself, Mitchell collected himself and stood to continue fighting. Unfortunately for him, Calzaghe would be just too much as the referee would step in to stop the fight after Calzaghe connected with devastating blow after blow. After narrowly surviving his run-in with Byron Mitchell, Calzaghe would make another defense of his world title before running into yet another unexpected obstacle in his 38th pro fight against Egypt's finest Kabari Salem, who held a record of 23 wins and 3 losses. All was going well for Calzaghe, who was cruising his way to victory. In the beginning of the 4th round, Calzaghe would connect with a huge blow that would cause Salem to lose his legs, sending him crashing to the canvas. Salem would shoot to his feet and shake it off, ready to continue the fight. With 1 minute to go in the 4th round, Salem would counter Calzaghe with a massive shot that sent the Welsh champion to the canvas for the 2nd time in his career. With flashbacks to his match with Byron Mitchell, Calzaghe rose to his feet and met the count to continue the match. He would pick up where he left off before being caught slipping and would quickly re-establish his lead. In the beginning of the 12th round, Calzaghe would score another knockdown, flooring Salem with a massive blow. Once again, Salem would quickly gather himself and meet the referee's count, and would ultimately finish the bout. Calzaghe would take home the wide unanimous decision victory, successfully surviving yet another brutal knockdown. In his next fight, Calzaghe would face a familiar foe in a rematch against none other than Mario Veit, who had been busy building himself a 15-fight win streak and now had a professional record of 45 wins and just the 1 defeat, 4 years after the 2 had previously clashed. Veit would put up a fight for as long as he could, and while he lasted longer than their original bout, Veit was ultimately outclassed once again. And after being knocked down in the 6th round, the referee was forced to stop the fight after Veit rose to his feet, only to be pummeled once again. Calzaghe had won every round on the judges' scorecards before the stoppage, showing that he and Veit were just on 2 different levels. After another masterclass of a world title defense against Kenya's Evans Ashira, Calzaghe would yet again put his undefeated record on the line against a fellow undefeated fighter in one of the biggest fights of his entire career. In his 41st pro fight, Calzaghe would face American Jeff Lacey, who was undefeated at 21-0 in a super middleweight world title unification match for Calzaghe's WBO title and Lacey's IBF title. with the inaugural ring super middleweight title also on the line. Calzaghe would come to fight, decisively outpointing Lacey throughout the night. In the 12th and final round, Lacey would nearly become another victim of Calzaghe's crushing punches when Calzaghe connected with a huge uppercut that froze Lacey and sent him to the canvas. Lacey would make it to his feet, clearly stunned, and make it to the final bell. Calzaghe would win by a wide, unanimous decision. He would make one defense of the IBF title against Cameroonian-born Australian Sakio Bika with a wide UD victory before vacating the title for refusing to fight his mandatory opponent, then undefeated German champion Robert Stieglitz, in favor of a more popular opponent, Peter Manfredo, and bigger fights. Calzaghe's next fight, and his 44th pro fight, would be the biggest of his career thus far. He would face off against Danish champion Mikkel Kessler, who entered the fight undefeated at 39-0 in a super middleweight world title unification match for Calzaghe's WBO and ring titles and Kessler's WBC and WBA titles. Calzaghe would come away as the newly unified super middleweight world champion with a unanimous decision victory, with scores of 116-112 twice and 117-111. To everyone's surprise, Calzaghe would vacate all of his world titles before moving up a weight class to light heavyweight. After the weight change, in his 45th professional fight, Calzaghe would face one of his toughest foes to date, the incredibly decorated American legend and former middleweight world champion Bernard Hopkins, who entered the fight with a professional record of 48 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw. The ring light heavyweight title was up for grabs, though it would not be smooth sailing in his light heavyweight debut, as disaster struck for the Welsh champion in the opening round. Hopkins sent a stiff right that smashed against the chin of Calzaghe, sending him to the canvas. Calzaghe would bravely rise to his feet to continue the battle. At the end of the 12-round championship affair, the judges would be split in their decisions, with 2 judges scoring the bout in favor of Calzaghe with scores of 116-111 and 115-112 respectively, though one judge awarded the fight to Hopkins with a razor-close score of 114-113. Now the newly crowned ring light heavyweight champion, Calzaghe, would set his sights on yet another well-known American boxing legend, in the likes of Roy Jones Jr. for his 46th and final fight, who entered the fight with a record of 52 wins and 4 losses. Unfortunately for Calzaghe, the Hopkins fight would repeat itself, and Jones would send him to the canvas in the opening round. Calzaghe would collect himself and rise to his feet to continue the fight, and would outwork and outbox Jones to a wide unanimous decision victory despite the early knockdown, with scores of 118-109 across all 3 judges' cards. Calzaghe would subsequently retire from the sport of boxing as the undefeated Pride of Wales, with an unblemished record of 46 wins, with no losses or draws, as an astonishing 24-time world champion, and as the longest reigning super middleweight world champion in boxing history. And that has been the resume check of the incredibly decorated Welsh champion Joe the Pride of Wales and the Italian Dragon Calzaghe. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment down below and leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to see more of my content.